Hey guys, this is the closest thing I have to a Spider-Man mask, and this is my Spider-Man No Way Home review. I don't even honestly know where to start with this movie. It was so good, and I'm not just saying that because I love Marvel movies. This was genuinely, it was such a good movie. Obviously, it's in the title, but spoilers, do not watch this if you have not seen this movie, or if you don't care, then go ahead. It's your loss. So I don't know if this was the greatest Marvel movie of all time, if the greatest Spider-Man movie of all time. I don't even know. I'm still trying to decide that, but it's definitely a contender. I'm trying to compare the impact of this movie and say like Marvel's Infinity War and Endgame, which I think are it's two biggest contenders when it comes to greatest Marvel movie of all time. And I don't know, I feel like Spider-Man kind of takes the cake. Infinity War and Endgame, they were great because there's a lot of hype around them, but what this movie did has honestly never been done before. And I mean, I guess what Avengers Endgame did has never been done before either, but I don't know. Maybe when I come down off the hype a little bit, my mind will clear on this decision, but enough of that, and let's just talk about this movie. I've seen some people say that the beginning of this movie kind of feels a little rushed and all over the place, and I can see why they say that. For me, honestly, the whole, and here's our first spoiler, Charlie Cox, his Daredevil in this movie. He's Peter's lawyer, and he clears his name in the beginning of the movie from the murder of Mysterio. And I actually did not realize this until after I watched the movie and I watched a breakdown of it. It did not hit me that Spider-Man's name was cleared. I mean, I know, I was a little confused on that. I was like, I guess everybody just doesn't care about that anymore. So I think when it comes to that, I can see where it was a little rushed, where him getting his name cleared and then wrapping up the events of the last movie, it did feel a little rushed, but again, it does not ruin the movie at all. The beginning of the movie still is great to watch. It feels amazing. You really feel the struggle of our three main cast characters, Peter, MJ, and Ned, after Peter's identity is revealed. They can't get into college. Everybody's swarming them at school. I don't know why Peter even went to school anymore, but, good for him, I guess. He wants to get that education. You really feel for these characters and the emotion from all the scenes of them not getting into college, from them going back to school for the first time, from them dealing with the aftermath of all this is really emotional, and the performances from the three of them are phenomenal. So Flash tells Peter that he knows of somebody that works for MIT that could maybe work something out to get Ned and MJ into college. And it turns out that she's actually leaving to go to the airport, so that's when he goes to the bridge to meet that lady that we've seen in the trailer. And this is when we first get to see Doc Ock. All of the villains feel like really great, true continuations of who they were in the previous films. The performances from all the villains are all around great. I think my biggest problem is Electro. He really had a glow up going through the multiverse, and it's not really explained. It's mentioned, but it's not explained. So we get Doc Ock, and him and Peter fight, and then the Goblin shows up, and then they're warped to Doctor Strange's little prison that he has, and he's already captured the Lizard, and he has Doc Ock now, and Spider-Man's there with Doctor Strange. This is after they did the whole spell of him trying to make everybody forget that he's Peter Parker. I kind of glossed over that. So yeah, he does this whole spell that, he wants everybody to forget that he's Peter Parker, and he interrupts the spell and messes it up, and this huge explosion happens. Then Doctor Strange tells them, I'm not doing this for you, blah, blah, blah. So now fast forward to back to where we were. Doctor Strange tells Peter that he's working on fixing the spell, putting it in this box so he can send them all back, but in the meantime, he needs to go and collect these multiversal villains. So we get to see Peter going around fighting Sandman, Electro, and then eventually meeting the Green Goblin. Willem Dafoe is great in this movie, and the first time we meet him was so... it felt like that Thanksgiving dinner scene in Spider-Man 1 where, we know he's the Green Goblin, we know he's evil, but they're all together, and I don't know. It was, I loved this scene. So Peter brings Norman Osborn back to the Sanctum where all the other ones are locked up, and Doctor Strange comes in. He throws the Green Goblin in a cell and then tells Peter that he's going to send them all back to their universe, but there's a little discussion going on, and Peter learns that they have all been killed by their versions of Spider-Man. So Peter is not okay with sending all these people to their deaths, so him and Strange have a little fight, and then he ends up locking Strange in the mirror dimension. Then he comes back, he frees all the villains, and they go to Happy's apartment where him and Aunt May have been hiding out since his identity was revealed. And Peter tries to work on curing all of these people. That's at this point when we get to see the Green Goblin's true intentions, and he screws everything up. Peter's little tingly sense starts going off, and this scene was so good. They're all in the apartment, and we get this really, if you have to see the movie to know what I'm talking about here, but the way that they show his spider sense was so cool in this movie. And he webs Norman Osborn's hand, and because he just knows. And then Willem Dafoe brings out his acting chops, and the Green Goblin comes out. So he does a little monologue, and then everybody starts fighting, and we get the first really good fight scene of this movie. It was really reminiscent of the original Spider-Man Green Goblin fight back in the first movie. It was close quarters, hand-to-hand combat in this apartment building, going down through the floors. And then we get the first scene that made me cry in this movie. Aunt May dies. They did this so good. This is why I'm saying, like, I never thought that this movie would do this to me. But this death is honestly right up there with Uncle Ben's death in the first Spider-Man movie. It was so good. It was so emotional. She said, "With great power comes great responsibility." Oh my god, it was so good. It was so good. And this had me crying like a baby. Oh my god. And then Happy pulls up. He sees Peter over May's body, and there's police there. They start to arrest Happy, and he's screaming at Peter to run. Peter gets shot. It was so, words can't describe how good this scene was. So then right after that, we get the next part of this movie that made me cry. Toby and Andrew. The leaks were all true. I mean, we knew they were. This was so good. Ned opens up the portals. I mean, it was kind of just like, they were kind of just like, all right, here they are. I thought they would have a more of an introduction than that. I was fine with it. It was still really good. The theater was screaming. Everybody was clapping. And yeah, Andrew shows up first, and then Toby shows up first, and Andrew was in his suit. It was so good. It was so good. His portrayal of Spider-Man, I think they did a much better job with it this time around. And Toby was the same as he was in the old movies, and it was great. They come in, they talk a little bit, and the one stupid part, I think this is probably the stupidest part of this movie that I thought, and this actually came from poor Tobey Maguire. When he says that when he got to this universe, he's been looking for Peter Parker ever since. And he goes, I got a sense that, he needs my help. It's like, yeah, no shit. If you travel to an alternate universe and you see the alternate version of yourself, you're obviously gonna go and I don't need to elaborate on this, but whatever. This ruined absolutely nothing for me. I just wanted to point it out because, I have so much good to say about this movie that I feel like I should say, one or two things that I didn't like. So sometime after this, we get my favorite shot from this movie. Well, maybe my favorite shot from this movie. The one that is coming to mind as my favorite shot of this movie was the one of Peter standing in the rain on top of a building, staring at the billboard the giant flat screen billboard of J. Jonah Jameson talking about Spider-Man, And oh, dude, that scene was perfect. I loved that scene. So he's being gloomy. You know, Aunt May's dead. He wants revenge. He wants to kill the Green Goblin. And Ned and MJ are out looking for him along with the other two Spider-Man to try to talk to him and try to figure things out. So Ned and MJ, they find Peter on a roof because Toby. I'm gonna call them by their names because I mean it's gonna be too confusing. So Toby suggests that maybe he has a place that he would go that means something to him. And then I think they go to the roof of their school where we see Peter and MJ on in the beginning of the movie. So Ned and MJ go up to him first. They talk to him. Peter grabs the box and he says that he's gonna send them back. He doesn't care anymore if they die. He wants them all to die anyways. You know, he tried to help them, and this is what he gets for it. So right before he does it, MJ snags the box away, points up, and then we see Toby and Andrew up in the distance in the moonlight. I love this movie. So they come down, and we get the first interaction between Tom, Andrew, and Toby. So they talk to Tom a little bit about, you know, how they know how he's feeling. I loved this scene too. Andrew says that, you know, once he lost Gwen, he started to pull his punches a little bit, and he started to get really vengeful. I love this for his character, especially since, you know, his two movies were a little bit darker than Tom and Toby's. So I love how they stuck with that and sort of painted the picture of him going down a darker path than the other two. And then Toby talks to Tom about how he lost his Uncle Ben. This movie was a lot darker than I thought it would be. Tom, you know, he's saying that he wants to kill the Green Goblin. He just wants to see him dead. And I really like how, you know, the past two films, they were, you know, they were silly. They were very lighthearted, upbeat. And with this one, there was a much darker tone to it. So the three of them, they try to figure out a cure, and after this, the rest of the movie is a lot of just the three Spider-Men interacting, and that's exactly what I wanted. That is exactly what I wanted from this movie, was just a lot of footage of them just interacting with each other. They joke around about, you know, how Tom and Andrew have mechanical web shooters, but Toby has organic ones, and they ask them, did they come out of anywhere else? And this movie, not only did it make me cry several times, but I was laughing basically throughout the whole thing. It was so good. It was funny, it was sad, it was dark, it was light. It was one of the greatest movies ever made. So they figure out cures for all the villains, and then they go to the Statue of Liberty, and then we get the giant ending fight battle, which was so good. There were so many good shots of the other Spider-Man fighting solo, fighting together. There was another phenomenal scene that made me cry here. MJ is falling off the Statue of Liberty, and Andrew's Spider-Man jumps down and saves her, and as we all know, he wasn't able to save Gwen Stacy in his movies, and he starts tearing up, asking her if she's okay, and this was so good that they gave him a little bit of an arc in this movie. I love that. I love how they really play into the fact, and they are very self-aware in this movie of the rankings of each of the Spider-Men. You know, there's a part where when Ned's fighting them all, they go, alright, we're gonna find the real Spider-Man now, and then Tobey Maguire shows up. There's a lot of poking fun at Andrew's Spider-Man. It's good. They really handled this well. They were very self-aware of each, you know, of the fans' love for each of these characters, so they did a really good job. So again, another phenomenal scene in this movie is at the end of this battle, Tom and the Green Goblin are duking out, and Tom is just going in on him, and this was such a good scene. It was so satisfying. Not because I hate the Green Goblin, just, you know, because he killed Aunt May, and he's a bad guy, and I love to see somebody get the absolute shit beat out of them. And Tom Holland, for like 2 minutes, is just punching him in the face, doing web moves, kneeing him in the face. There was a few parts during this fight scene where I was literally out loud in the theater, like, yelling, like, damn! Like, It was so good. So Gabi's on the ground, and Peter goes to pick up his glider, and he's about to bring it down on him and stab him, and Toby jumps in and stops this from happening. He just kind of looks at Tom, and then Toby gets fucking stabbed. Me and the person that was next to me in the theater were freaking out. We were like, no, they are not doing this. They're not gonna do this right now. And then he's just like, I'm good. I've been stabbed before. I was like, oh, thank God. They almost got me. Oh, last thing I want to mention about this fight scene is, yes, we were all right in that scene where you see Sandman, Electro, and the Lizard all jumping at Spider-Man, and the Lizard gets kicked by thin air. Yeah, they did cut Toby and Andrew out of that scene. We got that shot, and all three of them were in there. We were right. We're not stupid. So the movie ends with Doctor Strange's spell going through. Everybody forgets that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and we get... once again, another scene that was phenomenal and that made me cry. This is when Peter goes to MJ and Ned to say his final goodbyes. Him and MJ say that they love each other, and they kiss, and I cried, and then he leaves. So I think a little bit of time passes before we see Peter again. You know, there's some snow on the ground. He's at Aunt May's grave. And once again, another phenomenal scene and another scene that made me cry. He's at Aunt May's grave, Peter, and Happy comes up, and then Happy's like, how'd you know her? And at first I thought he was joking around, and then it hit me again. I was like, oh, that's right. He doesn't remember Peter. And this was so fucking sad and depressing. They talked a little bit, and God, this movie does not have a happy ending. It really does not have a happy ending. So that happens, that traumatizing scene happens, and then the next traumatizing scene happens where Peter's walking down the street with this little piece of paper rehearsing what he's going to say to MJ, and he walks into the coffee shop and sees MJ there, and she's sort of looking at him, but then Ned walks in. Turns out she was looking at Ned. I think once Peter sees Ned, it makes him a little more nervous. He goes to talk to MJ, and he just orders a coffee. He tries to talk to her a little bit about MIT, and we just get this really emotional scene of the two of them. And she has no idea who he is. This was absolutely heartbreaking. I have no other words for it. And then the movie ends, or at least the main movie ends. So I'm gonna give my review of that, and then I'm gonna talk about the two post-credit scenes that we got, which they actually did something a little bit different for this movie. I'm gonna have to go with a 9 out of 10. I'm a little hesitant to give any movie a 10 out of 10, but if I were to, I wouldn't argue with a 10 out of 10 for this movie. It was so good. It was perfect. There were so many scenes that made me laugh. There were so many scenes that made me cry. There were so many scenes that just made me feel good. There was nostalgia. Phenomenal performances all across the board from everybody. Something else bad that I can say about this movie, the CGI. Doc Ock, I think, worked a little better in the original movies with real practical arms being puppeteered by people. I think, you know, the impact of his character worked a little better with real arms, but again, you know, it doesn't ruin the movie. The Toby fight scenes too, you know, I think it you know, seeing him fight didn't feel as good as I thought it would, just because there's, you know, a lot more CGI involved with it. But, you know, like even simple shots of just the three of them running were, you could tell they were all three of them were completely CGI'd. So that, I think, would be my biggest complaint for the movie was, and I mean, it's Marvel. All the movies are like that. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge Marvel fan, so the CGI fest in these movies doesn't always bother me. I just think the reason it did here was because when it came to Toby and Andrew, you know, their portrayals didn't feel as true just because there was a little more CGI involved, but they were still great. That is just me trying to find something wrong with this movie, but I really can't. I loved all, however long, I think it was like 3 hours. We went in there at 11:30. We came out at 2 in the morning. So, but yeah, 9 out of 10. Go see this movie. Go see this movie in theaters with people, because the reactions were on the same level as Infinity War and Endgame, and if you had fun during those movies, you can have fun during this one. This is not just going and seeing a movie. This was a genuine fun experience. You know, you really get something with this movie that you don't with other movies. Just the genuine reaction from everybody in the theater, laughing, crying, screaming, clapping, yelling, everything together, you know. It was so much fun. With that all being said, let me talk about the 2 post-credit scenes here. First one we get is Venom in back in the island that we was on from where we saw him in the Venom 2 post-credit scene. So this is right after, and he's talking to some guy, and he's learning about all the superheroes in the world. He talks about Iron Man. They talk about Hulk a little bit, and I knew this. I think some other people knew this because this had been leaked a little bit, but it unfortunately is true, and I guess they kind of have to do this to make it make sense. But Tom Hardy is blasted back to his universe after Spider-Man does his whole thing. But he does leave behind a little piece of his symbiote, so we might not get Tom Hardy unless they go down a really confusing route and either bring him back into the MCU somehow, or maybe the MCU is going to do their own version of Eddie Brock and they're just going to use Tom Hardy again. But that was such a weird way to go about this. But at least we're still gonna get the same Venom, hopefully. I mean, usually these symbiotes will take on their own personalities, but we might get the same version of Venom. Who knows? And for anyone confused why he got taken to the MCU, because in his universe, he had no knowledge of Spider-Man. And only people that knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man were the ones that got brought into the MCU. My theory for this is most likely because Venom shares a hive mind across the multiverse with all other symbiotes, so he may have shared the same mind as the one that we saw in Spider-Man 3, because Tobey does mention this. So that could be how Venom has the knowledge that Peter Parker's Spider-Man, and that could be why he got brought into this universe, and that would also explain why he recognized Spider-Man on the TV when we saw him in the post-credit scene for Venom 2. And the second one, I don't have too much to say about it, but they went down a pretty different route this time around. Now, we've seen this before, kind of with them shoving like straight up just taking scenes from the next movie and putting it in the end credit scene. I think we saw that at the end of Doctor Strange, when they took a scene from Thor Ragnarok of Thor and Doctor Strange meeting, and they just straight up ripped that scene out of Thor Ragnarok and put it as the end credit scene in Doctor Strange 2. But this time around, they just throw the whole trailer at the end of the movie. But I'm not complaining. I've been waiting to see the Doctor Strange 2 trailer for a while, and I was not disappointed. This movie looks interesting. It doesn't look as crazy and trippy as I thought it was going to be, but I'm sure they're just, A, probably maybe haven't finished special effects for scenes like that, or B, just they don't want to show that, all the crazy stuff yet. But it looked interesting, and it looked weird, and I'm all for that. So, Ooh, well, I honestly, it's kind of hard to believe that I actually saw this movie. Feel like I've been waiting for it for so long. I've been watching theory videos on this fucking movie for months now, and I actually just saw it. I'm actually finally making this review video on it. This does not even feel real, but that's the video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the movie in the comments, and or just by leaving a like or a dislike. Not everybody can see the dislikes anymore unless you have that browser extension, but I can see them and I will know, and I will look at those dislikes if you leave one. So leave your thoughts, your opinions. Somehow even dislikes help my channel. I think so. I've heard that somewhere. I don't know. And if you want to see more of this, subscribe. But with that all being said, I'm gonna end the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.